Um, Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CGMW live Q&A with Carlo. How do you pronounce your last name, Carlo?
Arellano.
Arellano? Okay,
yes.
Enough. Well, basically, he'll give a brief introduction pretty soon, but before we start the actual live Q&A for those who are in attendance right now, I want to go over a few points. First of all, if at any moment during this live broadcast you lose connection to your actual session, you have to physically restart your computer before you can log back into the GoToWebinar session. It's a technical glitch that we have no idea why it exists, but as of right now, that's the only workaround that we have. Beyond that, for those of you who have microphones and or webcams, please make sure they're plugged in and working prior to asking your questions. But in general, if anyone has any questions, can you please type them into the question field, and that way I can go down the list and ask the questions based on the order that they're received. So without further ado, let me switch it over to Carlo. So Carlo, it should be in your screen momentarily. One second. Okay, Carlo, did you accept there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say go ahead with your introduction, and whoa, you already have stuff showing. Perfect. Okay.
Excellent.
So go ahead.
My name is Carlo Arellano. I am a concept artist, senior concept artist over at Insomniac Games, and prior to that, I worked on Planet of the Apes, Spider-Man, Van Helsing, and over at Blizzard on World of Warcraft. So I'm here to answer any questions you have about the demo or concept art in general. So let's get started.
Okay, 1 second. I think we have no one submitted any questions that I can see. If you guys are there, there's a field that you can type in for questions. And while we wait for them to flood me with questions, Carlo, if you can start, I guess, talking about some of your artwork and showing a slideshow if you have it.
Okay. Well, what we're looking at right now is a demo that I did for class, where I originally drew this war beast in pencil, scanned it in, and then turned it into a multiply layer. And underneath that, I painted the textures and the rendering, as well as some of the finer details. If you notice, the character design itself has a kind of composition. There's this triangular composition that all points towards the head, so even though I may have more complex forms handed in here, it's all pointing towards the head. And here's this diamond shape that helps frame the whole thing. Now, we can go over real quickly the things that I was talking about in the demo. Now, as I said before, the students in my class have a tendency to use what I call FACTS as an acronym, F-A-C-T-S, form follows function, archetypes, characterization, tools, and silhouette. I don't consider silhouette until I've considered the other story aspects of the design, because that's what dictates what the design will be. Well, let's take a look at two existing designs. Not done by me, obviously, but let's take a look at Serenity. Now, that's a very clever ship. It's supposed to look like basically some sort of sick turkey, and it's also supposed to look kind of junky. Now, that's a clever idea. We have these heroes that are in this kind of junky ship, and we're supposed to feel for them. But there are weaknesses about this design. Now, when you're designing something like this, there's a big component of this ship is the romance of piloting your own ship. Now, most people wouldn't want to fly this ship. And also, it's suffering from what we call the layer cake, which is three objects competing both in size and importance and level of detail. If you look at the central fuselage, the engine section, and then the cockpit section, they're almost all the same size. And that really, really weakens the design because your eye doesn't know where to look. About the only time you really do look is when the ship goes into high speed and then this starts to, glow. But it fails at the first rule of designing ships like this, and that is, do you want to fly it, right? Whereas the Millennium Falcon, it's also a junky ship, but you want to fly it, and it doesn't suffer from, as we were saying, the layer cake syndrome. The Millennium Falcon essentially is designed like a flying saucer meets a World War II bomber, and so you get that sense, even though you don't have it on a conscious level, subconsciously. All the cool things that you might associate with that stuff comes out. The cockpit section is a lot like the B-29. We've got belly gunner and top gunner just like you would have on Flying Fortress. And then, like I said, it's shaped like a flying saucer. So yeah, it's junky, but it's something you want to fly. Let's see, let's go over a couple pieces of my work.
Carlo, 1 second. We have a bunch of questions that just popped in, so we'll come back to this in a second, if that's possible. The first question we have is from, I believe this is Cassiano Pinheiro, Marcel da Silva.
Brazil.
He doesn't have a microphone, so I'm going to read the question that he wrote. He's basically says, when you have to work with the character with more complex, I think it's, it says elementary-like armor or clothes, you apply textures in the same way on the video. Do you use any reference, like the arm of the creature in the screen? Do you use any ref for the construct of the arm? So I guess he wanted to say that complex or rudimentary-like armor, clothes, and things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that comes with, I mean, I have looked, for example, when sketching out this kind of, this Dead Space demo that I was doing in class, I did look at photographs of Apollo astronauts, but I didn't look at too many of them. In the beginning, when I was first starting, I had reference all of the time, and that's what you should do, because it'll give you a mental library of shapes and forms. But as I went on, I started to use it less and less. Not because it's unnecessary, but because I started to develop that library. As soon as you draw something, it becomes yours, and it's something that you can use later. Like, for example, let's look at this one. So this was the quick sketch of it. Now, I know what sort of ammo packs look like. I know what the ring on the neck of a spacesuit looks like. And so I had that in my head already. And when I designed it, oops, that's a good one to look at anyway. When I designed it, that stuff I didn't have to really look for reference at. Whereas in the case of this there's nothing that really exists that's like that. And I wanted to create these Victorian elements on this space age thing, and my reference for looking at this stuff was more sort of the little things that hold test tubes together, and you know, kind of finer details, things like that. But yeah, I do look at the reference. I do have a really huge library of model aircraft and actual photographs of aircraft and photographs that I've taken at aerospace museums. I've also, you know, stuff that pictures that I've taken at the zoo. But the reason why all this stuff happened with me was originally I was a creature designer. You know, originally it was always stuff like this, right? And one time I interviewed for a job, and I didn't have enough robots in my portfolio, so I didn't get the job, and I was so mad. So for weeks, all I did was try and draw robots and mechs and things, and started to develop a facility after looking at, you know, you look at reference, you draw, you look and you draw, and it starts to develop. I hope that answered your question.
I think it did. I'm going to move on to the next question. I believe it's from Rina Cheng. Basically, Rina, if you're there, I'm going to see if you have a mic or not, because you didn't tell me in the post. So if you're there, can you say hello? Can you say hello? Rina? Rina? Okay, I guess not. Well, anyway, they ask, have you done any character designs for animation? If so, how is it different from character design for games? I don't have, okay, she did say it, okay. So if you can answer that, Carlo. The question was, have you done any character designs for animation? If so, how is it different from character design for games?
Well, it's not that different. I've done some stuff for smaller projects for friends of mine, but the closest to it is designing animation style objects for video games. I mean, I've done a lot of that, working on Ratchet and Clank, and you know, more cartoony stuff like the stuff in World of Warcraft. Now, really, there's the difference between both film and animation and games are the goals are slightly different. There's an overarching goal of you're still trying to tell a story, but the stories have different have a different focus. For example, it's much more important to show emotion as a storytelling device in animation than and in video game, although you might want that, your main goal is to be able to tell the feedback for the player experience. Now, if the main character is what you're dealing with, then it's how, for example, when he hits another enemy, like how quickly does that, you know, how quickly does he do it? You know, does it feel responsive? Does it feel like if you press a button, does he have to go through a long animation loop, for example? That makes him less responsive. Whereas if you have maybe 2 or 3 frames when you're doing an attack animation, then you know it feels more responsive. So you have to design around that. Like there's a reason why, say, Dante from Devil May Cry has a huge sword, because it has to read really well in fast animations, because basically you have his get ready animation and then his end animation, and in between there's sort of a 1 or 2 frame quick weapon trail. So yeah, that's the main focus in games, player responsiveness. Whereas in traditional or even digital film animation, the main goal is how expressive he is in order to, you know, push the storyline more. And so you design the face, the physicality, all that stuff based around it. Now, both of them can still be, both of them can still work, you know, and both of them are not mutually exclusive. Like there's going to be times when you're going to need emotional content in games, and then there's going to be times when in movies when you're really focused in on the character's quote-unquote special attack. For example, Toothless in How to Train Your Dragon. You know, he's an animated film character, but his breath weapon, the way he flies, all that stuff is relevant to the audience experience. So it's something that normally would be great to translate into video games. Also works well for story. Okay, next question.
Okay, thank you, Carlo. The next question is from Jose Artundo. Let me make sure if he has a mic or not. So, because Jose didn't say either, but so Jose, if you're there, I want you to say hello. Can you hear us, Jose? Jose? Okay, I'm going to just read the question that he asked. It's similar to the last question, but I think a little bit different in that he asked, what's the difference between a design for World of Warcraft, low polygon and small texture stuff, and a design for film, you know, fully detailed?
Oh, right. Well, as you said, it's low poly stuff. Now, not only is it going to be low poly, it's going to be fairly small on your screen. So when I first arrived at Blizzard, I didn't understand. I was young and I didn't understand all that stuff, and I was used to doing stuff for film. You know, I was doing things that were designed to be far more subtle. You know, if I were to design, you know, we've got a creature like this, and the limbs are really way too small. As much as they're exaggerated here, they're really way too small for something like World of Warcraft. So what you do is you find points of exaggeration, whether that's going to be the shoulders or the helmet and things like that, the weapons, and then you design them big. You know, you turn everything up to 11, and you make it colorful, and you put fiery textures on it. Not something that would work well if you were doing, you know, The Mist, you know, as a movie. Although there are some movies where, like Hellboy, for example, where things are a little bit more exaggerated. But yeah, what's important is strong silhouette read, bright color, you know, like this. The blades, the wrist blades, are huge. You know, if you had that in say in Lord of the Rings, it would look ridiculous. And that's sort of the main drift of that sort of stuff. You just have to be a little bit louder. Now, part of the reason for that too is you avoid the uncanny valley, especially when you don't have a lot of fine animations for the face and things like that. People tend to be more forgiving of an exaggerated character than they are of something that's really close to human. As a quick explanation for people that haven't heard of what the uncanny valley is, it's this idea that was put forward by a Japanese roboticist back in the 70s, where the closer you get to human, the more you empathize with the object, right? For example, Mickey Mouse has some very human traits, but the closer you get, there's this point where you stop looking at what's correct about it and you start nitpicking what's wrong with it. There's a couple movies that have come out, for example, say Polar Express, where it's almost there human-wise, so but there's some things missing. So it feels a little bit creepy. and doesn't quite work well. Whereas if you watch The Incredibles or How to Train Your Dragon or Kung Fu Panda, it's very obvious. You know, they're very empathetic because they can make big moves. So that's another reason to deal with that. And also, again, with the large object, it helps show player progression. When you get a new epic weapon, if that new epic weapon is huge and easy to read, then all of your friends or your enemies can tell, oh yeah, that dude has the giant epic sword of thunder.
That's good. Thank you, Carlo.
No problem.
Move to the next question from Autumn Fredrickson, or Fredrickson. Basically, Autumn asked, haven't had a chance to finish the workshop, so this may have been addressed, but I was wondering, how did you start out education? What was your early experience like? Thanks.
You mean, I'm not sure if you're asking me how I started teaching or how I started learning.
I guess
so I'll address both.
I guess I mean, you can do like a brief summary if you can, but I guess.
Okay, so.
Yeah, she's asking how did you start out in this particular, I guess, career or so.
Well, really, it started out when I was a kid, because when I was 9 years old, I saw Alien, and then when I was 11, I saw Blade Runner. Now, I also, you know, when other people were obsessing over Star Wars,
she amended the question, but how did you start learning it? I guess.
Yeah, this is part of it. This is very, very important.
Oh, okay.
So seeing those movies, when everybody else was watching Star Wars over and over again, I was watching these movies over and over again, and I was wondering, how do you do that? How do you? I mean, I saw American Werewolf in London. How do you start doing those things? And then I started simply just drawing what I saw on screen, but what I thought could make it better. And that's where really my early education came from, and that's sort of what makes me a designer as opposed to an illustrator. I started thinking about the logic of these things. So in high school then, I found my high school teacher was a very realistic Western painter. So he was always doing cowboys and Indians and things like that. And, you know, I learned kind of drawing craftsmanship from him. And then I went on to study at the University of Santo Tomas in the Philippines, where I studied advertising. Now, back then, and in the Philippines, advertising was a fine art course. You learned very traditional illustration, and we were even drawing the fonts by hand, because we were so ghetto back then. You know, the most high-tech piece of equipment we had was the airbrush. And that's sort of what the sort of competition I got there from the other students was what instilled in me a commitment to quality. But design-wise, there's another presenter, Anthony Francisco. He and I would just sit at his house and design all day, and I learned quite a bit from that. You know, and just us grooving together, we learned our own sort of design sensibility. And then the real education came when I first started working with people like Rick Baker and Jordi Ushel and Carlos Fuente and guys like that, and seeing their work process. That's what really gave me the skills to really design. Oh, and before that, I was at this small school that used to be in Pasadena called Associates in Art, and over there I met Mike Butkus, who paints very similarly in the style of Drew Struzan, and then I learned sort of illustrative shortcuts and how to refine my technique. But most of my design stuff came from the constant competition with my friends, and because I was also in a graffiti crew in high school. Another fact about the graffiti crew, most of those guys went on to either become designers in the toy, fashion, or even movie industry. For example, one of them, the youngest guy in our group, Warren Fu, became an art director over at ILM, and he designed General Grievous.
Very cool. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. This is from Ricardo Velez. He asked, the question is, do you use image references when you are designing the character, animals, or anything? I think you kind of answered it already, but go ahead.
Yeah. I can go over again real quick because this is sort of an important point too. But yeah, every time back in the early days, anytime I would show up to a new gig, I would have a ton of books with me. I mean, now all you need is your flash drive or whatever. But back in the day, I would show up with a bunch of books on primates, frogs, whatever, depending on what the particular show was about. And I would have them open, and my friend Konstantin Sekaris, he got me into having the giant cork board where we would put up the images, sort of reference images, huge on the wall as sort of inspiration images. But then after that, now when I do it, generally I sketch first, and then if there's a particular thing I don't understand, then I'll go look up the reference, which happens less and less often when I'm doing monsters and sort of animal-like things, but I still do quite a bit when I'm doing mechanical objects, because I feel like there's a lot for me to learn right there.
The next question is from Art S. I don't remember if Art had a mic or not. Art, are you there?
You still there, Ted?
Can you hear me? Art? I guess not. Well, Art's question is, what do you think is the most important element to create an iconic character? Is there something that you always remember to create a memorable character? Carlo?
Well,
did you hear the question?
So as we're waiting for the organizer to get back on, let's go over the principles again.
Hello, Carlo?
So form follows function. Things generally look like what they are. So a large cybernetic war beast, you do a large cybernetic war beast. Like I said before, it's really helpful to
Carlo?
Sort of distill your ideas of what the character you're going to do down to one statement. If you can say it in one sentence, that's great. Giant space gun. As soon as you say that, that informs all of your decisions as you're going along and designing things. Let's see. Let's double check. Ted, can you hear me out there?
Me. Carlo?
Okay, let's see. Let's take a look at the attendees. Hello? Hello? Yeah, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Go on, try again.
I'm test. Can you hear me now through the speaker?
No, I can't actually.
Maybe he muted.
Okay.
On his end.
Excuse me, everyone. We're having a little technical difficulties. I'm trying to figure out why Carlo can't hear me right now. Bear with us 1 second. We'll be right back.
Maybe
Well, I've got you on speaker right now.
Well, I think everyone can hear me, but for some reason yours is muted from me, so I'm not sure why that's going on. But I'm not sure which question we left off on, but I think
I just finished the one regarding reference.
Okay, then we'll move on to Jazz McDaniel. Basically, let me see if Jazz has a mic.
Jazz, are you there? Yes, I'm here.
Okay, can you ask a question?
Yeah, my question was, I pretty much narrowed it down, but what would you suggest to help newcomers strengthen their rendering skills?
Hold on, I am not hearing any of that at all.
Really?
No, I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, well, let me put my phone next to the speaker so we can get you to hear it. Jazz, can you ask it one more time?
Okay, the question I had was, what would you suggest to help newcomers strengthen their rendering skills as far as like the final output of the character design?
I'm getting way too much feedback to do it on the phone. Let's try to figure out
a way to
do
I
this.
think
I'm going to double check my audio. Okay, let's see. Speakers.
Again, sorry everyone for this.
Unmuted, okay. Okay, I still can't hear any of you.
Okay,
let's see, maybe if you could do me a favor, Ted, and simply type the messages in the chat box. I'm so sorry, guys. Let's figure this out. I'm going to see if it's just those speakers or my speakers. It's no wonder they're good at backup and progressive combined. So talk to your neighbors, then call an agent, 1-800-STATE-PHONE. You're seeing wild kingdom. You stick to the archetype. So the particulars change, right? But the principle remains the same. Because sometimes you're going to use, for example, an archetype's, or rather a character's tools in order to convey it. Sometimes it's a scar. Sometimes, you know, and when I say scar, I mean like a characterization. But you're always trying to achieve that something about the character that sums up the one-word sentence that he is. When we think about, again, let's talk about Darth Vader. Darth Vader, the Black Knight. Well, you design that sword. You know, the red side, his red sword of death, is really symbolic of who he is. And you know, it's the same case with Spider-Man. With Spider-Man, it's even more obvious. Spider-Man or Batman, they actually have the symbol on their chest. And when it comes to characterization, if we're talking about, I may have discussed this during the demo, Sagat from Street Fighter, he's got the big scar on his chest, and that symbolizes who he is. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's the character's tool. Sometimes it's his haircut. Sometimes it's that overall silhouette. Let's talk about the xenomorph, or the alien from Aliens. It is the dragon. It is the deep, the monster from the deep. You know, it comes out of the darkness. It's a personification of death, and in many ways, it's a violation. With that creature, they're trying to frighten you. I mean, now we've seen him often enough that he's gotten a little passé, but he's still a brilliant design. He's essentially a death rape machine. You know, and everything about it says that. And in his case, the skeletal body, the skeletal frame, the mouth, that's a horribly penetrative weapon, you know, and his head is like a giant penis. So that's what you go for. You know, you look for that one word. For example, Indiana Jones, adventurer, archaeologist, and you give him the tools. You know, his gun, his satchel, his hat, the telltale hat, and the whip. All that stuff symbolizes what he is.
Okay. I think that covers that question. I'm going to have Jazz ask his question again. I'm not sure if you heard his question when he was talking the first time. So Jazz, if you're there, could you ask your question again?
Yes, my question was, what would you suggest to help newcomers strengthen their rendering skills? I'm assuming a final render with the character colored in and everything would be important. Sure. Character design. I mean, are there any books or websites that you would direct newcomers to?
Yeah, actually I would. Scott Robertson's DVDs on materials are really good. They're not fancy. It's really just him with cubes and spheres and things like that, using markers and pencils, but it'll give you quite a good polish. The other thing too is if you ever take a figure drawing course that teaches the Riley method, it's a really it's a method in which one can map shadows and rendering fairly quickly when you're doing figure drawing, and it'll show you a beautiful way to render these objects. It's just good old-fashioned drawing. You know, I often tell that to my students. I mean, a bunch of students now, especially since they've been relying on Photoshop rather than traditional media, I've never learned that sort of skill. So, you know, constant drawing from life plus those things that I pointed out will help a lot. And also, you know, if you're near any good atelier school that teaches good figure drawing and good landscape painting, just traditional skills like that. Now, I'm not talking about sort of the fruity stuff that you might learn in college or whatever. I'm talking about people that know how to do traditional art. That's also very helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Carlo, for that.
No problem.
We'll move on to the next question. I believe it's from Norman Lee. So, Norman, if you're there, I'm going to unmute you so you can talk.
Hello?
Hey, Norman. Hey, Norman.
Hi. My question was, in your video demo, you only completed the head of the alien character.
Sure.
Would that be enough to show a director, or would you have to go ahead and resolve the rest of the body as well?
In this case, for the initial pitch, since it's a Mass Effect kind of character, yeah, that might be enough because it's very likely that the uniform is already designed. But oftentimes, I mean, just to give you an idea, that is, I mean, I can do that in about 2 hours. It was funny, like just trying to talk and draw at the same time, and not having students to talk to you while you're vibing actually slowed me down. I was like, what's going on here? I'm used to the energy of having the students around. But normally, I take it to, say, this level of render right here. Can you see that? Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
You know, stuff like this. This is sort of like how far I resolve things. Let's take a look. Here we go. You know, and for example, this is sort of something that I haven't painted all the details in, but it's enough, you know, for them to go on. Whereas, you know, a character like this one's a bit more resolved, right? But yeah, it really depends. If you're dealing with producers in movies, for example, a lot of the times you will have to do a really tight rendering, and that's often involving maybe doing a ZBrush or a Moto model and then painting over that. But for that particular demo, since Mass Effect really is just a bunch of talking heads as far as designs go, and the bodies are all fairly similar. That would be sort of the initial pitch for that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
No problem.
There's a question from Stefan Nakatutskasa. I hope I didn't butcher your name too badly. Stefan, if you're there, could you say hello?
Hello.
Hi, Stefan.
It's Stefan.
Steve.
Hello. My question is, I wanted to know how much information they gave you to design a character in your game company. For example, they give you lots of the back history, or you have to create a lot of that on your own.
Okay. Usually when it involves the main character, there's usually already a lot of backstory because the creative director generally has a really strong idea of what they want. I mean, I'm sure if you're dealing with a character like Solid Snake, then yeah, he has a very I wouldn't say complex, but fleshed out backstory, and so that's a big aspect of it. But then more minor characters and monsters and things like that, you often don't get that much of a backstory. Only key characters in the game. Even then, sometimes it depends on the focus of the game, because I'm pretty sure the first time they were doing Samus from Metroid, they didn't have much of a backstory, and it's something that developed from there. And sometimes, you know, they just come up to you and, for example, on Planet of the Apes, I didn't get much of a backstory at all because the characters were being written as I was designing, and they would just come in and go, well, we need an ape general, and then start doing that. And sometimes there's a feedback loop where your design starts informing what happens. I remember being in a situation where a writer working with a creative director came up with a female character, and then I drew it, and they liked the female character so much that they started writing in more female characters in the game just so they could see more girls I could draw. But yeah, sometimes that happens.
Okay.
But yeah, it's really dependent.
All right. Thanks for that, Carlo. I'm going to move on to the next question from Steve Caruthers. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He doesn't have a mic, so I'm going to read the question for him. Steve asks, hi, Carlo. How important would you say abstract theory and shape language is in character design compared with the other parts of facts? And at what point is this incorporated usually in the design process?
Okay, it's okay to have it's pretty good to have that background, but really it's all about storytelling. Okay, and there's certain things are true. Let's take a look. A hard corner causes more threat than a round shape. That's why when you're looking at, say, the towers in Lord of the Rings, then they're threatening because they have these sharp edges, right? I mean, let's do, say, a quick alien creature, right? So if I start off with kind of this round shape, and then another round shape, and then sort of like a little more bubbly shapes. Now we're exaggerating here a little bit, right? So we have like this kind of cute, cartoony, tick-like creature, right? You're not very threatened at all, okay? But as soon as I start putting edges on that shape, and create spindly joints, the personality starts to change. Now, you're talking about sort of more abstract, artistic concerns, right? Semiotics, I'm assuming, and sort of kind of Jungian symbolism. That's all valid. But it's not going to replace good, strong, basic drawing skills. Now, there's no point in being smart if you don't know how to communicate that intelligence, But yeah, it's another tool in your toolbox, and I say that these are tools, right? Because you can modify them, use them the way you want to use them. I'm not giving you, I was always told this by my figure drawing, one of my figure drawing instructors, Glenn Billifoo, who said these aren't rules, they're tools, because modify them as you see fit. Certain things seem to always work, but at the same time, if you find a new permutation, go for it. Right.
Okay.
Next question.
Thank you, Carlo. The next question is from Mohammed Zufar. He says, my question is, you mentioned that there's two different artists, visual dev and concept artists. With concept art being the more versatile path, my question is, what are the skills you need to work on to develop yourself as a concept artist? Thanks.
Well, a huge range. And I told you that situation with me when I didn't get a job because I wasn't drawing robots. I was a monster guy. You have to have the ability to have a huge range, both in rendering skills and in design sensibility. For example, so.
Okay. Next question.
Sure.
Are you ready, Carlo?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. The next question is from Sar Botman. I'm going to see if they have a mic. 1 second.
Okay.
Sar, are you there? Hello, Sar? I guess not. So I'm going to ask a question on their behalf. As a concept artist, is it important to focus on one aspect of the industry, i.e. character design / prop design, or environments?
Well, you can certainly go down that path, and it's it all really it's a hard question only because it all depends on your skill level or your willingness to commit. Just like most things, it's better to be really good at one thing than to be mediocre in a bunch of different things. Having said that, your versatility gets you more jobs. If you can do both characters and environments, that's awesome. But most of the people that I know, even the people that can do both, usually are a little bit better at one thing than they are at the other. But yeah, it's important to develop a facility and a core competency so that you will get hired. Like, oh, he's this guy, he knows how to do really good monsters and stuff like that, or he's this guy, he knows how to do really compelling environments. Than it is to be known as a guy that's okay at either one.
Okay. Thank you, Carlo.
No problem.
The next question is from Cesar Cavazos. He doesn't have a mic, so I'm going to read for him. His question is, 1 second. What is a good way to improve your skills in drawing, proportions, and other stuff? I know it's practicing, but what is a good way to put goals to improve our work? And he says, greetings.
All right. Well, hello back. Draw what you love. Because when you draw what you love, you're going to put in the amount of time and attention that's necessary in order to study that particular subject matter. Okay? If you're trying to get better and you're trying to get the just immediate sellable skills, it doesn't serve you to try to draw stuff that you're really not interested in at first. I mean, later on, you have to increase your range. But yeah, I mean, I got good at drawing girls when I go to figure drawing class, and because it's interesting, right? They're beautiful and it's interesting, and you're always drawing them and you're paying attention and you're going like, okay, these are the shapes, these are what I need to do, and it gives you an insight into general proportion. And I'm not just talking about human, because the human figure is the basis for everything we have in this world, as far as technology, tools, housing, whatever, because it's all based around human height, human shape. A doorway is the proportions that it is because of the way a human being fits in it. Cockpit of a car, the countertop on at the bar, that has to be correct human height. So a lot of things, a lot of manufactured things, a lot of things that are made by human hands are based off that initial human proportion. And so just like masters of old, you start with figure drawing. And then you start painting from nature, you start drawing from nature. Because then nature's natural proportion makes your design that much more believable. Because there are these sort of subconscious things that your eyes continuously picking up on to decide whether something looks right or something looks wrong, and that really comes from drawing experience.
Okay.
That answered your question.
I hope it did. We're going to move on to Oliver Alexis Dant Nava, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if they have a mic. Oliver, if you're there, can you say hello?
Yeah, hello.
Hey, Oliver.
Hi. My question is, well, when you do this kind of creator design or character design, do you need to do a model sheet too? Or, well, when you...
Yes, actually, yes, I do. And to me, it's all part of the fun. Learning to design things from several directions. I mean, let's go take a look at. Well, here, for example, this is sort of a 3/4 model sheet that's going on, and it's a combination of both the actual concept and then 3D modeler came in and sort of did rough shapes, and then I did a paint over it, and then let's take a look at my desktop. Okay. So let's take a look. So we were looking at this particular character, and then after that, I did a top and a front view as well. But here's an example of say a quick orthographic of the particular creature, and this particular model sheet both includes the shapes from the front and the top. But yeah, that's part of the gig. Sometimes you're basically creating a blueprint for the 3D artist, and it makes it easier and faster in terms of production, where you can have the art director and other guys take a look at it and say, yeah, that's approved, that's the way we're going to do it. And it's just, it's pretty typical. Although some 3D modelers are particularly well talented and want a bit of freedom, so they don't ask for it as much. But even the good guys need a little bit of help sometimes. And I try to do nice detailed ones because I care about the 3D modelers that I work with, and the less time they need to spend, the less wasted time they need to spend, the better.
Okay. Thank you, Carlo, again for answering that question. And these next few questions, we're going to try to go through a little quickly, if possible, so we can wrap up our time. Actually, we may be able to ask these last few questions. So let's start with the one from Phil Liu. How did you start working at Blizzard?
Okay. At the time I was still working in the movie industry, and I was working on a bunch of, after working on larger movies, I was working on a bunch of lower budget movies, and I was curious about working in the video game industry because at the time I think there was a writer's strike, and it doesn't matter how good you are. Sometimes there's no work when there's a strike. So I sent my portfolio over to Blizzard, and the HR guy over there was not only did he like some of the movies that I worked on, but he was a big Dungeons and Dragons fan, and I did some illustrations for the Edition 3 Monster Manual, and he was geeked up about it. So he got me an interview with the executive producer at the time, Mark Kern, and the art director at the time, Bill Petrus, and we just had a favorable meeting, and You know, as soon as I walked in, I think I may have been just a little bit of a douche because I came from the Hollywood system where they really want you to walk in and act like a rock star so they feel like they're in good hands. And that's sort of not the situation with video games. But you know, we got past that, and then I did a test for them, and they decided that they liked my artistic skills enough, and at this time I didn't have any 3D. They liked my artistic skills enough that they thought, well, let's just hire him and then teach him to 3D while he's here. So that, yeah, that's how I got my start with this.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carlo.
No problem.
Next question is from Julio Cesar Cano Isasa. I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly, Julio. But the question he asked, he doesn't have a microphone, by the way, is which creative solutions do you apply when you are blocked on developing a special character?
Well, it's all there under facts, you know. I mean, if I can't figure out what the character will look like through form follows function, then I've got archetypes. You know, I can look up archetypes, whether we're talking about death or you know, the young idealistic woman or the jester. And then if that's not working, you know, everything in that acronym is really helpful. Characterization, then you start thinking about character history, and character history will do things to the character, right? I mean, whether it's the clothes that he wears or the way he stands, things like that. It becomes, as soon as you start thinking in terms of storytelling, it becomes much more simple. Let's take a look at the Sith Lord real quick. So here's this guy. You know, I'm designing a Sith Lord, but I thought to myself, well, what if the Sith Lord didn't want to rule the entire galaxy because it's just too hard? What's better, to rule the entire galaxy on a very superficial level, or to completely control a single city? So that's where the idea started happening. I go, oh, you mean like Kingpin? And so thinking of a Sith Lord like designed around the idea of a Kingpin really started to inform his shape. So yeah, I mean, if one thing doesn't work, I mean, there's enough tools in the toolbox to start screwing around with other stuff. And you'll find that the larger your mental library, the easier it is to be able to come up with these solutions.
Okay, thanks a lot, Carlo, again for that. The next question comes from Michael. He asks, can you elaborate on your use of triangular shapes as opposed to other shapes?
Oh, I was just doing that to, the reason why I was using triangular shapes is I was just doing that to sort of break, and I used it as composition element, to break the golden section, you know. So the Vitruvian Man, the golden section, you know, something you'll see in the Parthenon. It's sort of seen everywhere, and if you stick to it too much, you start to get these kind of really boxy shapes, you know. You'll see it oftentimes in car designs and things like that. And so to create some more tension, I just start creating angles to it. And the triangle, pyramid, or whatever, what's nice about it is that it naturally creates a focal point. And you know, even the squares can be broken down into smaller triangles. Like from the tip of his claw to his shoulder point to the nose, there's a triangle right there. There's a larger triangle, you know, overall. Now, this creates a more dynamic shape than if I had built it simply on a square. And that's all I'm really talking about there. Let me give you an example. Look at, well, take a look at, say, the tumbler from Batman, and you'll see a bunch of these converging lines, creating points, you know, creating triangles. So it's really about trying to always create a sense of movement even when the character is static.
Okay. Thank you again for that. Our next question is kind of similar to the one Julio asked, but this is from Fernando Isamo. I'm not sure if Fernando has a mic or not. I'm going to check really quick. Fernando, are you there? Fernando? Okay, no mic, it's broken. So the question is, I would like to know, with your mind sometimes when it stays blank, and how do you resolve this kind of problem?
Oh, I see. Yeah. It's just like anything. You feed your mind. You know, you look at really creative people. You watch movies. You sketch from life. It starts giving you ideas. But having sort of a set list of things that you know you have to do. How do I explain this? If have you ever seen the movie adaptation? Because in adaptation, there's a scene where the main character goes to a seminar with a movie writer named Robert McKee, and then the guy goes, well, you know, I want to write this movie, but I want it like real life where nothing happens. And then Robert McKee loses his mind because obviously in real life something's always happening. You know, a mother loses a child. You know, a child is born. You know, a man wins the lottery. A man shoots himself in the head. It's these things happen. And then it's the same thing with the storytelling. You know, if you or with design, sometimes if you're doing an alien creature, well, you ask yourself, is it crab-like? Is it deer-like? Is it whatever? I mean, there's always something there, you know? And it's not a question of whether or not you have, if you learn to look, that is, whether or not you have inspiration. It's a question of whether or not that inspiration is something you can use, or whether or not you have the ability to be able to convey this idea effectively. You know, when we have something like this, that's sort of scorpion and crab-like. The original statement was this sort of a spider-like creature from The Mist, and you know, you start with the idea of the spider, but then you start playing with the idea of like, well, what does the front part of the scorpion looks like? What does the front part of the crab looks like? And then it starts giving you these points of inspiration, and we discussed this with the Millennium Falcon. I mean, like I said, the starting point, it's a World War II bomber mixed with a flying saucer. The tumbler from Batman, it's like the stealth bomber mixed with an assault vehicle. When we think of, say, you know, even more recent things, like the characters in Avatar. You know, the initial idea are these sort of idyllic kind of rainforest characters. So yeah, you start looking at Native Americans and people that have lived in rainforests, and you know, in this case, he's trying to do these idealized people, and so they kind of all look like supermodels. Whether or not you agree or disagree with his point of view, the point being is that there's always inspiration. You know, and opening your eyes to it. You should never get stuck for ideas. You should only really get the only way I really get stuck is when my skills aren't up to the task of being able to convey what my ideas are about.
Okay, thank you, Carlo. And this will be our last question for this session.
Okay.
It's from Juan Rubio. Doesn't have a mic either at the moment. He's asked, is there any other tips for pushing designs for small screen space, such as for RTSs or even mobile titles?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, really really understand the point of view that you're going to look at the character at. You're not just going to design things willy-nilly. Oh, I wanted to thank, by the way, before I continue answering this question, I do want to thank all of you that have come out and attended this program and came out to talk and to see me. But yeah, you know, really, let's go back to that sort of space character that I had before. Okay, so let's take a look at a guy like this. All right, so obviously not an RTS type of guy. He's not going to read very well from top down. But he with these designs right here, he does read well from over-the-shoulder point of view. And now this was a demo originally when people asked me how I would have designed the Dead Space character. My main idea was that I wanted him to look more vulnerable, so that I created kind of like this open, much more open mask, unlike the character that they had on screen, which was cool, but I felt like the game ended up not being scary because he didn't look vulnerable. He looked more like one of the bad guys, a powerful enemy, or like the Big Daddy from BioShock, and he did a vulnerable astronaut looking for his fiancée. So yeah, so clearly something like this wouldn't work, not only from you know, lack of exaggeration, but detail distribution. The details are not distributed in the point of view that you're going to be looking at. Let's take a look at another one. So, hold on. So this guy, all right. So a guy like this, you know, for more of an I guess isometric point of view, like you would find in Diablo, you know, with the character smaller on screen, this guy works well. Not only does he have oversized objects like the, you know, the missile rack up on his back, or the oversized gun that he's carrying. Notice that how his stance is. It's this sort of wide stance, and even looking at him from top down, you'll be able to see the movement of his legs when he's animating. But here's the important part. Again, we're using the triangle here again. If you take a line from the tip of these things, you know, the missile launchers, and the tip of the gun, you create this triangle. Now the triangle isn't just there to be a triangle. What it becomes is it becomes an arrow. Okay? So you know how the character is facing, right? As you're turning him around in shooter style, if an alien's coming towards you, or an enemy or a mech or whatever, you now know exactly where he's pointed, even if he hasn't started shooting yet. So that's another big tip. You know, what's the business end? What's the front part of it? Because stuff like that happens in nature. I mean, you look at a T-Rex, the business end is obviously that head. So that's one of your concerns when you're designing something small on screen. How's that?
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the Q&A, and for Carlo and his wonderful demonstrations and just incredible workshop. For those of you who are still interested, we have other workshops available for purchase, so make sure to go back to the site and check those out. Also, we will be providing this particular Q&A later on, probably in a week sometime. So as I check back on the site frequently to see when it's updated with this Q&A. And beyond that, make sure to also go to the Carlo's page and fill out the survey about what you thought about his workshop and everything. Beyond that, we thank you all for attending, and we thank you again, Carlo, for all your time and wonderful work.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.